So back to Thursday coffee chats, although I've got my lovely homegrown peppermint tea here. How are you doing, Brice?
I'm good. I don't have anything. I was just texting you before we got on. I was just finishing getting ready because it's early in the morning here. And again, you guys, I apologize if you hear banging outside. I mean, literally it's a foot outside of my window that they're building. So it's going to be that way for a while. So no demons in the room this time. It's literally contractors banging out next door building high rises. So I apologize if that sound carries through, but I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. And we were just chatting beforehand. There's so much in terms of on a global scale that we're noticing going on, but very much on an individual scale. We're all on our own individual journeys and learning a lot of lessons and coping tactics and what works and what doesn't work and how things were going through, observing how that affects the people around us and therefore what we're seeing in the collective. And today what we were going to start talking about is looking at projection and also some of the pitfalls that people go through as they go through that healing process. I mean, it's something you've got a lot of experience on, isn't it?
Yes, it's the one thing. So if we go back to the essentials, because people ask me all the time, I think it's amazing right now. We're entering into a time in our history where people are really taking an interest into their spiritual life. And I think we're so a little bit confused about what that means. And I've said it before, spirituality, yes, a lot of us have abilities to see beyond the veil and to channel spirits, but that's not what spirituality is. Spirituality is knowing your own spirit and keeping your eyes on your own yoga mat, as we would say in the yoga world, and understanding that everything in your life is a vibrational match to something within you. And so what tends to happen though when people start to go through their shadow work or their spiritual journey, I think, is that a lot of people in their mind, they have this expectation that spirituality is going to be just beautiful, amazing. It's like getting soothing massages every day. But that's not the reality. The reality is going on a spiritual path can be very dark. It can be very painful because what you're doing is you're basically deep cleaning your own soul. And so things that you have neglected to address within yourself, your shadow side, so the side of you that's not that pleasant, it's any type of spiritual practice, whether it's yoga, Reiki, whatever, it's going to pull that up, right? Even like the 12-step program, I believe, some of that stuff starts to happen too. Our friend Emmy has spoken about that a lot. And you have to then address it. And so what tends to happen, especially with people who are brand spanking new to this work, is they start to feel that anger, that frustration, whatever it is, the abandonment, the betrayal, whatever flavor of shadow is coming up. And instead of actually sitting in it and leaning into it, and working it out themselves, they take that and they project it onto someone else. So they start screaming at other people. They start losing their shit on other people because we know that energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? It can only be transmuted. And
Yeah.
so even on a subconscious level, we understand that. So it's like a hot potato, hot potato, you're passing it around. This ugliness comes out of you, and instead of actually you sitting there and looking at it, you take it and you want to throw it on someone else to get rid of it. And unfortunately, people who are mostly the victims of that wrath will be spouses,
Mm.
close friends, children sometimes. And so and of course we all fuck up from time to time. We're human. I'm guilty of doing that from time to time. But to understand that, to start to understand that's not, our friend Cindy at Sacred Garden Yoga always says, in this life, my goal is just not to create any more karma for myself. I don't want to create any more karma. And so we have to understand that in doing shadow work, you also don't want to create even more work for yourself later on by projecting ugliness onto someone else, because then their body is going to take that in and have a reaction as well. And so I hope that makes sense. So that's something we have to do. And that's why journaling is so important. That's why I have people in the Shadow Work Challenge journaling every day, because putting the pen to the paper, especially not just typing, but using a
Yeah.
pen, this is the extension of the fourth chakra. In writing, you can be as nasty and as ugly and as vulnerable as you want to be in that journal, because no one's ever going to read it. It's you getting that information, that out onto something that's not another human being.
It's so important. And I've been reading The Wisdom of the Shamans by Don Jose Ruiz, and it's absolutely fantastic. And what he talks about is that young rattlesnakes don't have control of their own venom. So a young rattlesnake can't control when they release the venom or not. And when you think about it, that's like a lot of young children have tantrums. They can't control those emotions. But when you're going through the spiritual development or the shadow world, you're stepping back into that role of a beginner, of a role of rediscovering these whole new areas of yourself. And that's why sometimes that's our venom that's coming out, that we haven't learned to control it. But it's so, so important to have that step to, one, realize that it's your venom and it can't come out of you unless it's inside of you. Good old Wayne Dyer quote, as we've spoken about many times before: if you squeeze an orange, only orange juice can come out. If you've got venom coming out, no one else has put that venom in there. It's inside of you and it's your venom, and you've got to choose where you release it, hopefully carefully.
And that's why, I know we talked about this last shadow work challenge. I have my modality of exercise that works for me, but I've put in multiple modalities into this shadow work for people to experiment. That's part of the reason why I put kickboxing in there. I'm even a kickboxer. So people who have the propensity to have anger issues where they do project onto people that they love, for them to experiment with the kickboxing, so that that's a healthy way to transmute that energy without putting it onto somebody else. And at the end of the second pada of the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says this: part of your job in this process is to learn how to control your senses.
Absolutely.
So you're not just
control them in both sense of the world. So to make sure that you're using them for the benefit of yourself and everyone else around them. So, that's part of meditation, is to control the senses and to use all the senses when you're out on a walk, for example, to really take in the absolute beauty of this planet that we're living in and all the creatures that are on it. But also to control your senses when they're working in a negative way for you as well. And isn't that what we do as we progress from children to adults? Every stage of our development is about getting more control. So, a baby wears a nappy because it can't control when it goes to the toilet. And then you learn to control that. And then you learn to walk. And then you learn to control other aspects of your behavior. And this is part of life's progression, but one that we all have to go on our own journey. And this is why I love, the way the shamans teach it, is every journey is unique. So yes, we can all use tools that are out there and a lot of the ancient spiritual wisdom that is there to help us and guide us, but each of us is on our own unique journey and will have different obstacles to overcome along that journey.
Absolutely. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about all the senses, in every human body. I mean, Catherine, you're a biologist. We know every human body, every body in every living, cats, dogs, humans, horses, we all have like a template of the same within our species, of like the same type of nervous system. However, because of the spirits, because of the psyche, because of the processing on an emotional level of information, my senses are going to be triggered in a different way from Catherine's.
Yeah.
And so everybody's experience is going to be very, very different. And sometimes it's a subtle difference. And yeah, that's exactly what, it's the same thing that we're talking about, the shamans. It's all the same stuff that they're saying over and over again. And I want to make it clear, though, when Patanjali is saying to control your senses, he's not saying bury them. He's not saying bury the anger. Like if you're in a situation where you feel yourself triggered, instead of lashing out on that trigger, pull yourself back, control it, and then go investigate by yourself or with a trusted teacher why something triggered you when it might not have triggered the person next to you, And so, and in that sense, that's why I love when Ram Dass says, when you feel those triggers come up, instead of reacting to the trigger, just be like, interesting. Okay, that person did something and I felt angry, but nobody else felt angry. Interesting. What did that trigger in me? It has nothing to do with the other person. And that's another thing too, yes, we all go through horrific traumas at the hands of someone else. I think every single person watching right now has had something, they were the victim of something. But at the end of the day, when you start doing that work on yourself, the person who instigated the trauma is kind of out of the picture when it comes to your own work. You are the one working on healing yourself and holding that energy. That doesn't mean, and we're going to get to that next topic of like accepting people, allowing people to change, but that doesn't mean, so if you have someone that RAPEs you as a woman, that does not mean that you have to bring that person back into your life. But what that means is part of your journey is to work through all of the the trauma that came from that situation, you know, and dig through that with yourself. There's no point pointing blame on you or anyone else. It's just, does that, like, so you're not taking this thing and doing it to someone else. You're not taking that hurt and hurting someone else with it. And so I see sometimes people, when they go through their healing, they like to play the blame game. And I get it. Like there's so many people in my life that I want to freaking yell out and smack. Like, I get it, you know, but at the end of the day, the blame game is not going to get you that far. What's going to get you that far is healing yourself. And that's why they say when you grant forgiveness to someone else, it's not about that person, it's about you letting it go, right? I hope that makes sense. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm telling people to not, you know, if you have been hurt horrifically, go to the police, file a police report, let the justice system karmically do what it needs to do. But as far as your personal healing, speak out about it. If you've been hurt by a corporation or something, like our whistleblower friends, speak out about it, talk about it, let people know. But in your own personal journey, crack it open even wider and heal yourself. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, the thing is, when you are holding on to that blame, and, you know, forgiveness is a whole different subject. Don't really want to go there today because that's a whole different topic in itself. But the whole point is we're here to learn and keep moving forward. And just because we on paper are adults doesn't mean that our learning stops here. And I know we're preaching to the converted, because everyone who's watching any of our channels is all very much already on a self-development journey. But even I hear a lot in the discussions that I've been party to and everything as well, it's that fine line. So this whole thing about they've done it to us by our education system, they've done it to us. Well, there comes a stage where we have to say, yeah, we have, but now I know better. I can make different choices. Because if we keep going on and dragging it back to, well, it's not my fault, I'm like this because that. No, we're not saying it's your fault, but once you've accepted where you are and where others are, yes, there are reasons for it, but if you keep going back over those and you don't sort of say, well, change it around to where do I want to go, you're not really going to make significant changes in your life. And equally, you know, the projection onto other people is so important, because there's a real, you know, everyone's always going, if you're making a decision to say do the 60-day challenge, you're making a decision. Now, your spouse might not be doing the 60-day challenge because they might have enough on their plate already, maybe loads of reasons why they're not. And, you know, I've learned the hard way when I first was doing all my herbal medicine. You know, there's times when you absolutely should not fast and should not do a detox cleanse and things like that, because if your body's not strong enough to do it, you can do more harm than good. And that's the same way when you're dealing with shadow work. A lot of the times is you've got to recognize that if you've chosen to go on that journey, you can't then start dragging other people into it that haven't necessarily chosen to do that journey right here, right now.
And that's such a good point. I was actually speaking with Emmy this morning about this. Our friend Emmy, and I don't think she minds me saying this, but we were talking about the weight of the emotions and how emotions can be very heavy when they start to be unpacked. You know, it's like, you know, think about it. When you go through, every time you move or you do spring cleaning and you open up all these boxes and you start going through all these photo albums, all these memories. I don't know anybody who's done spring cleaning where it takes one day, because they usually end up looking through everything and remembering and, you know, the emotions. So you think about that with yourself, you're unpacking all this stuff. And so things are starting to resurface. And I was telling her, you know, in the Ashtanga system, the primary series is Yoga Chikitsa. The second series is nerve therapy, Nadi Shodhana. It's nerve therapy, and it is second series is like the batshit crazy series, because its job is to trigger your nervous system. But I was telling Emmy, even with that being said, there is kind of a rule in the Ashtanga system that if I have a student that's going through a major life change, let's say they're going through a divorce, or they're moving, or their parent died, or even their kids leaving their house and going off to college, just because of the situation of their life, their nervous system is already stimulated. And so as a responsible teacher, my job is to tell that student, at this point, you need to go back and do primary series while you're working through this transition. And then we'll go back to second series, because your nervous system is already stimulated by the effects of what you're going through right now in your life. We don't want to overdo your nervous system to the point where you're having a psychotic breakdown. So that is very important to observe as well, that there is a responsibility. And it's like, and just because, I mean, some people find shadow work in the most peculiar times in their life. It's like that my favorite Ram Dass story is in the 70s when he was all dressed like a hippie and everyone was dirty hippies, and he was given this lecture on meditation, and all these dirty smelly hippies were with long hair and mala beads were in there cheering him on as he's giving this lecture on meditation. And then there's this little old lady in the front seat with her pearls and her purse and her, beehive haircut, just nodding, looks totally out of place with all these dirty hippies, but she's listening to Ram Dass and nodding in agreement. And he kept catching her, thinking, this is so weird. Does this old lady know where she is? Did she go to the wrong meeting hall? And after the lecture, she comes up to him and is speaking to him in the meet and greet. And he goes, I'm so shocked to see you here. And she just goes, I knit. And he was like, holy shit. All of us had to go to India and do these crazy things to find meditation. She figured it out by knitting. So you never know where people are finding their shadow work. Just because your spouse isn't getting up with you and doing, kickboxing, it's great if he is, or bar with you. It's hysterical when men do bar. I have a very funny story about a man doing bar with me once, and it was hysterical. But he might be finding that shadow work at work. There might be something, so in that sense, you have to back off, and let them find their own path, because all of our souls have a different journey and different stimulants in that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's where it's great when you've got people that can help you through that process, because, they will help you recognize when you might be overdoing it at some stages, or when you need to take a step back. So that brings me on to the next subject we were going to talk about, which for me, given everything that everyone's been talking about for the last few years, and where we're at personally, is a really big one, is how much are we as individuals open to really allowing people change? So on a common level that I think most people identify with, most people have got siblings or members of the family or extended family or long-term friends where they've set an opinion, and this is their character. You might be the grumpy one, or the funny one, or the clever one, or the silly one, or whatever. So people are very good at labeling others. But just because someone was like that 20 years ago or 20 hours ago doesn't mean that they're not here right now in a very different place. And I think part of shadow work for me is also very much about, are you really open to accepting people where they are? And are you able to let people really go on a different course in their life? And obviously we all know, being careful what to say, there's a lot of atrocities that people have been involved in that people are becoming aware of now. But equally, if you're not able to do it with someone that's a friend or a family member, that you're still classifying what they were like 5-10 years ago or even longer, how on earth are we going to, as a society, allow people to really come to the light, come to God, whatever you want to call it, when they've got more things to overcome that they might have done?
Yeah. And that's a hard one. We were talking about that off camera, and it kind of goes back. I think the more that you work on yourself, the more you can anchor into yourself. And I think that, of course, we all have people in our lives that have hurt us.
Mm.
And it's important when they're in that behavior sometimes to put a boundary up to preserve yourself. But if they actually are doing the work and seek forgiveness and want to re-enter your life, it's not saying you let them back in full force. They, of course, once trust is broken, it has to be rebuilt. There has to be a rebuilding of that trust. But you have to also understand that. The core of who I am has always been the same, but the way that I was in my 20s, I'm not the same person I was at 24 at all. I've changed. My perception of life and myself has changed so much with the work I've done these last 17 years. I'm going into my 40s now, and I can safely say, going into my 40s, I would never go back and redo my 30s. Just like I would never want to redo my 20s, because I lived that, and I learned, and I grew. And so if I can grow and learn, who's to say that somebody else can't grow and learn and change? Yes, behaviors have to be proven that they've changed, but that's the beautiful thing about being a human being, is that we have choices, and we have self-restraint, and we have the ability to take control of ourselves and to course correct. And so, and you're right. Like before this whole great awakening, we'll call it. I was never a fan of capital punishment. That's all I'll say, because I don't want to trigger the algorithms. But of course, in the United States, some states have it and some states don't. I live in a state that does have it. And I was never fully comfortable with it. Like, and I know my grandparents used to be very big supporters of it because they didn't want to use their taxpayer monies to keep, these awful, because there's only like one crime you can really do to get that sentence, right? It's not like you could still live with bread and all of a sudden you're on death row. But, but I always felt like that whole, you do eye for an eye, tooth for, I just never felt like that was really. Now, of course, with what we know now about some of these atrocities, there are people that I'm like, hell yeah, hook them up, But in saying that, even in that, before I knew about this, I think there was always a side of me that was like, well, where's the rehabilitation?
Yeah.
Where is if we're expecting people to course correct, then we have to allow them to course correct. We have to allow the rehabilitation. And then you take it on a lesser scale with people in your life that are just assholes that have done nasty things to you, but they're doing those nasty things to you because of something broken within themselves. And so if that can be healed and corrected within themselves, then can the relationship be salvaged? I think it can.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, there's always extreme examples, that everyone knows what we're talking about here, where it makes it much more challenging. But the core thing is, I mean, we spoke a couple of weeks ago about the importance of telling the truth. And I've been speaking quite a lot in the interviews I've been doing about, this is where my difficulty comes when you're looking at black hat actions, white hat actions, and all this talk about, well, they have to because the dark side play dirty and therefore they've got to play them at their own game. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just not a believer of that. I do not believe you can raise consciousness in humanity by both behaving like that. I mean, supposedly it was Einstein that said that you can't solve a problem from the same awareness or consciousness that it was created at. And this is what I see. So I've never gone for that. Doesn't mean that other people won't. But if we're looking to elevate in consciousness and actually make lasting changes, an eye for an eye approach, a lie for a lie approach doesn't work. But that also works on an individual level, as how much are we being really truthful in our own lives? Because we can't criticize all the politicians for telling us a bunch of lies and everyone else if we're doing it even at a macro level in our own lives, and so many people have the opinion. And again, I'm not saying what's right or wrong for anyone else, well, sometimes it's important to tell a white lie. But is it? That's what I'm questioning. Is it important to tell a white lie sometimes? Because really, have you then really broken that trust? And I think it is an important one for us all to look at, because I'm seeing so much still about why aren't they doing this? And it's just a question that keeps coming up for me. And the answer keeps coming back, unfortunately, to the same teachings that in all the spiritual things come back to the same, is about what are we all doing at an individual level?
Yeah. Well, and it's that you're saying it's a simple term for that is two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree with you on that, Catherine. It actually boggles my mind that people think that the white hats are tricking people because they're playing. Listen, if the white hats are playing dirty, I don't want them. I don't want them being our saviors. That's not okay with me. You look at all the great teachers of the East and all these great gurus and palm gurus. They have the ability to trigger people, but they don't do it in a dirty way.
Yeah.
It's honest, integral. Is there integrity here? Way. And yeah, I love that you can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. And that's true. We know people who've been, I'm coming up on 17 years now. My birthday always falls along the line of when I started. And it's 17 years of me realizing, I know we've used this quote a lot too. My mother actually used to quote this line from Shakespeare a lot when we were kids too. I love it. Oh, the tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive. And so a lot of times our own minds deceive ourselves. And a lot of what you're doing in shadow work is course correcting, is untangling all those tangled bits so that you can see things truthfully and clearly. And so with that same attitude of one consciousness you can't create something that was created on a different consciousness level. you have to untangle that with truth and with honesty and clarity in order to heal it. So I absolutely agree with you. And when it comes to, so when we have people, yes, I understand. And I want people to understand, Catherine and I are not saying people that are doing horrific things to these or to the animals, because I see it this I am horrified. Same with the animals. Do not deserve, they definitely, that they made their, you don't accidentally stumble into one of those, we'll just call it a dance hall for, you know, you guys know what we're talking about, one of those places. You don't accidentally show up there and end up accidentally doing that. There is a very conscious decision that you've made to do that. And so for those people, absolutely, they're going to have to then pay the piper for that, as they say. But for others, where maybe there has been some coercion and that it's not as bad as that, you guys know what we're talking about, I think there can be rehabilitation. And I have heard from a source that they are going to be revamping the prison system, where there are going to be people, because the prison system is supposed to be a place of rehabilitation. And so they are going to be revamping it, where there are going to be people that are going to be going into like a rehab to help them like heal themselves, because there can be forgiveness, there can be course correction. You know, every case is different. You know, of course, there are going to be people that are serving in the hard labors of like, you know, so every case is different. And it's almost like, you know, I think we all in our lives at some point have needed to be forgiven for something. And thank God there were people in our lives that forgave us.
Absolutely.
You know?
I see it a bit like whether you've got any sort of addiction. If the person, for me, and this is just my simplistic view, folks, so again, please don't think I'm asking anyone to agree with me, but the way I'm at the moment, and that could change tomorrow in light of new information, is it's a bit like, you know, if you've got someone who's got an addiction of any sort in their life, that you can't, however much you love that person, you can't change that addiction. They have to be ready to change. And then, of course, you can help find support for them and experts they can work with and take some temptations out their way and things like that. But however much you do that, you know, we all know people that have been sent to rehab and they come back out and they're straight back into it because they didn't choose, someone else chose for them. And that's a bit the way I see it about people. I think even people who've done all sorts of levels of horrific crime, if they genuinely are doing the work and want to change, it's possible. But then if they're not, you can't do it for them, again, no amount. So I do think every case is very individual, and you could argue, everyone can always come up with an argument for one side or the other. However, what I'm saying is I'm just noticing a lot, and there's a reason why I'm noticing it, because obviously I'm meant to be doing something about it for myself, is I'm looking at saying, where am I still in judgment of people or myself, and both normally, because I wouldn't be noticing it so much in others if it was, you know, if this wasn't resonating with me. And what I'm thinking of is, you know, there's so many people, you know, let's take people who work for mainstream media, or a lot of people who work for charities. A lot of people, they don't go into these jobs being corrupted in the first place. And most people who go into mainstream media, let's face it, if they want to be a journalist, it could be their lifelong ambition. They might have worked really hard up through the ladder to get there. And then they get there. And how often does this happen where things aren't all that they seem? And not everyone's having the same experience. You, Jamie, Soleil, and I have spoken about this a lot, about not everyone in top level sport is aligned with the dark side. It's ridiculous. They're not. Not every person on mainstream media is.
Not everyone in Hollywood is.
Exactly. So I think, you know, when we're talking about why aren't things happening quicker, I think for me, it's about each and every one of us and looking at, am I working on myself enough? Am I working on myself? Am I putting a different energy out into the world? Because we all know that our energy fields extend well beyond our physical body. So if we're not, all those energy fields merge together and create the consciousness that we're seeing.
Yeah, my dad's dad, who died twice. He had his near-death experience, and then he actually died a few years ago. But when he had his near-death experience and he walked into the light, he had a very different perspective on life. Mm-hmm. And I only knew him after that, but that experience. But he used to always tell us all the time, the only thing you can control is yourself. Everything that you think is security can be taken away from you. And we've seen that. Like, banking accounts drained overnight. Bank of America, that just happened here. You know, the shutdown, the lockdown, all of a sudden things are out of your control. And that's so important too when we're talking about why haven't they done something? Why haven't they done something? And I'm frustrated too, guys. I hear you.
Yeah,
Like,
I am as well. Yeah.
yeah. But the whole spiritual practice is to be, are you okay? Let's say that it's not going to flip for another 10 years. Can you be okay with that? Can you find peace? Because that's what true spirituality is, being at peace with whatever the outside world is presenting you with, because you can't control that sometimes. And so all you can do is work on yourself. And that is you taking your power back. And how appropriate is that too? Because that's what the controllers want. They want to puppet us. They want us to be at their mercy. You know, help us, oh controllers, mighty ones. Oh, help us, white hats, oh mighty ones. Like, no, we have to help ourselves. And once I think we start helping ourselves, we do, the reins of control from the world around us release a little bit, because they're not affecting us anymore. And so it's a hard lesson. I mean, and I'm not saying listen, I don't call myself a yogi, because a yogi is someone who has found enlightenment. I practice yoga because I have not found it. I'm constantly, you know, as Guruji said, all life practice. 10 years, 1 month, no good. All life practice, because every stage of life is going to meet you with different opportunities and obstacles to heighten that awareness. And as the law of one says, the more aware you become, the more you heal, the more things are going to come to you to really challenge the healing even more, to bump you up to that next level of awareness. And so sometimes it feels like it's not letting up, because the universe is encouraging you to dig a little deeper, to push a little, to go even higher in your awareness. And how beautiful is that? And that's one thing, like, I do have to say, I know people hate it when I say this, but you know, there's a saying, what the devil will use for bad, God will use for good. If it wasn't for the controllers, I wouldn't be here talking to Catherine right now, or to you guys right now. There is certain things about myself that I would not be aware of. And so that friction is necessary. And you have the power. It's your power. So you can say, okay, this is what they've been doing. These are the atrocities they've been doing. I understand now. I get it now. I know that that's being taken care of by another group, but what I can do now, since I understand what's happening, is I can take my power back so that they can't control me anymore. And as Catherine said, that doesn't mean that you can force your husband or your wife to do the same thing. They might still be at mercy of the controllers, but you can control yourself.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a good point. Sorry, I interrupt there. But the other thing is it's all of us, every single person, it doesn't matter who you can, you know, think of the person that in the old, you know, put on the pedestal that you really admire, because it might be, you know, in the thing that you're really passionate with, they're really top of the game at the moment. But every single person, in some aspects of their life, they're playing the teacher role, and in other aspects of their life, they're playing the student role. You might say child, you might say adult, whatever way works for you. And I absolutely love the parts of my life where I'm the complete beginner and I have to know nothing. They're the most enjoyable parts of my life, because there are parts of my life, like in my day job, where I'm really hopefully helping people with their animals, and that, you know, their awareness about what they need more.
You changed Ravi. I'll just say, Catherine is the miracle worker. Ravi is like a totally different dog because of Catherine's diet. So
yeah, and that's just one thing to do. So in that role, I might be the teacher, just because, like you've always said, I have spent the last 20 years studying this. But in other areas of my life, like I was listening to Michelle Clan talking about the legal system, complete beginner. When I listened to you talking about a lot of the shadow work and some of the other stuff, complete, you know, beginner or intermediate. Know a lot about that, know nothing about that, which is why I just love learning. And what I would encourage everyone to do is be so grateful for those areas of your life where you're the student and you're just starting off, because there's such a freedom in not needing to know anything and just being able to absorb all this wonderful new knowledge. And you know, Shanti and I spoke a couple of weeks ago about not waiting for the med beds, and we absolutely weren't talking about the fact that, well, I wasn't anyway, about the fact that these technologies aren't there. What we're saying, there's so much out there at the moment, and if only if all of us realize whatever area we feel we need to know more about or we're being drawn to, there's so much already for us. I mean, the history of the Bible, I knew nothing about. I knew I didn't believe a lot of what we've been told, but I'm so loving being the student in that. So that's my
Me too.
embrace those areas of your life where you don't need to do anything and enjoy learning from people who all you need to do is just learn from people who know a little bit more than you. If you go
Yeah.
too far up, it can be too much. And, you know, when everyone realizes that in some areas of their life, they're the parent or the teacher, they're taking on that role. In other areas, they'll be in a completely different role, and everything in between as well.
And I'll give you an example. I'll tell you the story about the man who went to a bar class with me. That's what happened to me. And I love learning too. I find this stuff, like, that's what I present on my channel, I would be doing by myself anyway, because I'm a nerd. I find it fascinating. And I find the body fascinating too, because the body is the energetic expression of the soul. And so this is very fascinating to me. Well, you know, they say in a beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, and in an advanced person's mind, there are few. And so when I broke my sacrum back in 2016, it was one of the most painful experiences. It was so painful. Of course, my practice that was very strong, and it's strong now again, all of a sudden went completely down because I had literally broke my ass, you know? And I was struggling and struggling. But what the opportunity that presented itself, my friend up in Canada, Chris, who is a movement expert, bar was really getting big at that time. And he goes, Brice, I think you need to start taking some bar classes. It'll help you recover. It'll help your sacrum get stronger, because you've been doing the Ashtanga for so long, your body just knows it. And so you need something different to help it restabilize. Well, I was going to bar classes here in Atlanta, and later found Marnie Alton, who I really love, online, but I was fascinated with the way that they were moving the body, creating this restriction with the bandhas. I recognized it from, they don't call it bandhas in bar, but I recognize it. So I was a beginner again, even though I wasn't a beginner in the yoga, I was a beginner again, seeing the functions being used in a very different way. And I was fascinated by it. And still to this day, bar fascinates me. And because I took that opportunity, my yoga practice is now 10 times stronger than it ever was before, because I took that opportunity to be a beginner. But during that time, when I first was introduced to bar back in 2016, I was going, at that point, Todd lived in Decatur, which is a part of Atlanta. It's a very, well, I'll just be crude. There's a side of Decatur where the band, oh, my mind's gone blank. I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. I Am For Real, that band. They're from.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, my mind's gone blank now on their name. But anyway, the other part of Decatur is a very wealthy part, and we call it Dick-hater because it's where all the lesbians live. But Todd lived there for a long time, and there was this bar, a pure bar. I could walk to it from his house, from where he lived. And so I talked him into, it's amazing when you first start dating a man, a girl can literally get a man to do anything when you first start dating, because you know you control the bedroom basically. So,
Yeah, exactly.
so I talked Todd into coming with me to a bar class. And in this bar class, it's a bunch of women, you know, like housewives, rich housewives, the lesbians, me. I was new to bar, and I talked him. So he comes to this afternoon class with me, and the girl who's teaching the class was cracking up because she doesn't get men in the class that much. And the whole time we're holding the ballet bar, and I am hearing noises coming out of Todd that I've never heard before. He is sweating like crazy. I heard more F-bombs drop than I've ever heard come out of him. And the instructor would walk by, and she would look at me and just start laughing, and I would start laughing too. It was hysterical. I think he has hated me for that ever since. But when we got at the end of the class, the instructor was like, "And good job to Todd," like the only man in the class. But you know, and that's it. And we're walking home, and he was like, "I thought I was gonna die." He was like, "I literally thought I was gonna die." But you know, but there's joy in that. There's joy in the beginner, where you get to look back at those times when you were. I mean, he was this master Ashtanga teacher who studied under one of the leading gurus in India, had his butt kicked by one of the leading gurus in India, and then he was a beginner. He's a very fit man. He's buff and six pack, all because he's practices. Here he is in this bar class with all these women, and he's dying. and at least he could laugh about it afterwards, and we still laugh about it afterwards, that, he's never done it since. But
I'm
you
not
know,
surprised.
it's fun. It's to have that beginner's mindset, though. It's a beautiful thing because it's fun to be a beginner. It's fun to be a beginner.
Fun, and to have that joy of something to head for. When I first started, I'm a very basic kickboxer. I only done a couple of series of little classes. But when I first started again, I really thought I was going to be going in and doing all the James Bond moves and everything. And then when I realized how difficult it was, I couldn't stop laughing, because I was like, this is comical if anyone could see me now. But it was such fun because we were all learning together. And that, I must say, the instructor is very tolerant. So, but because they love it. They love seeing people. You can be very fit in one modality and really struggle in another. And you can know a lot about one subject and know nothing about another. And how boring would it be if we knew all the answers? It'd be so.
I was about to say, that's what makes it exciting. I tell my beginner students in Ashtanga all the time, I said, just know your first period of being a beginner, it's going to be a flop shop on your map. It's going to be a flop shop, and it's going to be a shit show. Be okay with that. We love the shit show. Like, it's okay. Over time, you'll develop that control, but allow yourself. Richard Freeman, a very, very famous Ashtanga teacher, says the two things you need to practice Ashtanga yoga is the ability to laugh at yourself and a sense of humor. And I think you can take that into everything, because being a beginner is fabulous. It's so fun to be the beginner, because there's many possibilities. There's many possibilities in the beginning.
Absolutely. So let us know below what you're enjoying being in a beginner on. I think most of us who've been on this journey together for the last few years are really enjoying all the new knowledge we're doing. And then it gets to a stage where, for me, it gets a bit more challenging, where you're thinking, okay, what am I meant to do with this now? So we'd love to hear your comments, and we will be back on Brice's channel next week.
Yep.
Thanks so much.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And if you feel inspired, please do share with your friends and family. My goal is to inspire as many people as I can to live their best lives, to stay curious, and to raise their consciousness and that of the collective. So to do this, I need to reach as many people as possible, and this needs your help. If you feel drawn, would you be willing to share your favourite episode with 5 different people? This helps us spread the word, and also helps me encourage some exciting new guests to take part in this podcast. If you feel drawn to do that, I will be very, very grateful. All the links and discount codes where applicable for all the products that I support are on my 2 websites, catherineedwards.life and catherineedwardsacademy.com. All of the products are personally tried and tested by me, my family, and my clients. And finally, please do press the follow or subscribe button, depending which platform you're listening on. And above all, stay curious and stay free.